All right, so let's say you want to make a game where you've got multiple targets. Now, you can see I've got 4 here that are all moving. They got slightly different speeds, they're in different positions, and so I have 4 objects that I'm tracking, the X and Y position of and the speed of. They need different speeds because they're bouncing off the sides at different times, so sometimes they're going up, sometimes they're going down, so they need to be able to change independently. So I've created 2 functions, one called draw targets, which draws all 4 balls on the screen, and another one called move targets that moves all 4 balls on the screen. So let's take a look at draw targets. You can see it's not too bad. I've got an ellipse at x1, y1, an ellipse at x2, y2, and so on until I get all 4 of them. And again, if I wanted to add a 5th one, I would just add one more line with 2 more variables. Then when I get to move targets, right, I'm just changing the y position of each of those. It's not so bad. But now, when I want to see whether it bounced off the wall or not, I need to have 2 if statements for each of my, these are all the if statements I need to make sure the 4 balls will bounce off the top and bottom of the screen. It gets very untenable very quickly, and if I wanted to determine whether I clicked one of them, I would need an if statement for each of the 4 balls, and then if I added a 5th one, that's a whole bunch of extra lines of code I have to add, or if I added 6 or 7 or 10, you can imagine how crazy this could get very quickly. So instead what I do is I take advantage of 2 different concepts that we need. One is called arrays and one is called for loop. So let me show you real quick. Again, very similar sort of thing. This time I've added a little bit more. I've got a score on there. And now if I click them, I can actually, the more I click one of them, it gets faster than the others. Pretty cool, right? Now let's see what my code looks like to make that happen. First off, we need something called arrays. And what arrays are kind of like variables, right? So we had a variable, and a variable is kind of like a bucket, and a bucket can hold one thing. Well, an array is like a series of buckets welded together, and each chamber can hold one thing. So far, so good. So like, you know how you ever see those pill things where you've got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and you can put pills in each of them? It's kind of like an array, and then you write the name of the person on the outside, grandma's medicine. Not a problem, right? So Mr. Dickey's medicine, whatever, it doesn't matter. Each person in the household can then have a different pill holder, and then there's different pills for different days that they might be looking at. The same thing is true here. So if I want to track the position of 5 objects, inside of square brackets, I put 5 numbers, one for each of the objects. All right, so I've got an X position array, I've got a Y position array, and I've got a speed array. So far, so good. So then if I want to draw any one of them, the way I do that, I'm going to go ahead and comment out my draw and move targets for now and my print score, so I don't need any of that. So if I want to draw any one of those, I would go ellipse xpos, but now xpos is a whole array. So if I want to draw one of them, I have to tell it which one. And so I put a square bracket and I tell it which one. So I'm going to say 3. And then I would go ypos 3. And this will draw, and then I'm going to say how big to make it. So far, so good. So then if I run that, I draw one of them. Well, which one did I draw? You would think it was this one, but it's not, right? This one has an X position of 150 and a Y position of 300. 300 would be down near the bottom of my 400 canvas. This one's up near the top. So arrays, when we look at arrays, the very first one in the array is index 0. So we call each space in the array an index. And the first one is index 0. The second one is index 1, and so on. So if the array has 5 things in it, they are numbered from 0 to 4, all right? So they are numbered from 0 to 4. So if I asked for the 5th one in the array, I expect this not to be very pleased with me. And there we go, I get an error message, and it says, I don't know what to do, and nothing got drawn because there is no 5th element. I'm sorry, there is no 6th element in my array, which means there is no index 5 in my array. So far, so good. So if I wanted the very first one in the array, I would put 0, because we start numbering at 0 in computer science. And then it draws it at position 50, 200, okay? So how do I draw all 5 of them without having to write this out? Because I could do this. but then I haven't really gained much. So I could write all of these out one after the other. One after the other, and it would run just fine. But then I haven't gained anything. What did I screw up? Oh, capital P. But then I haven't gained anything by using the arrays, other than cleaning up my variable declaration section. So what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of the fact that computers like repetition. So I'm going to then show you what my draw targets function looks like. So there's my draw targets function. So let's take a look at draw targets so I can make sure that we understand what's going on. Now I'm using something called a for loop. You with me? A for loop right here. This will loop a number of times. So the way this works is right here we say let I get 0. So it says create a variable, name it I, and set its value to be 0. Okay? Then it asks the question, is 0 less than 5? Yeah, 0 is less than 5. So I then do what's inside the loop. So what this says is draw an ellipse at xpos index I, which in this case, remember we just set it to 0, ypos index I, so we set it to 0, 50-50, so that draws this ellipse right here. Then we come back around and we do what this says, which is add 1 to the value of I. So in this case now, I has a value of 1. Is 1 less than 5? Last time I checked, 1 was less than 5. So now I draw xpos and ypos at index 1 instead of index 0. So that means the second one in my array. And then I come back around and I keep adding until I get to index 4. So I draw ellipse at index 4, which is my 5th array. And then I come back around and I add 1 to this, which now is 5. And so is 5 less than 5? No, it is not. So then I leave my for loop. So this basically, you don't have to really understand a whole lot about how this works. 2 things you got to know. Anytime I'm going to do anything with my targets, and I'm doing a clicky game where I have to click the targets, anytime I do anything with my targets, it's always going to involve using a for loop that looks just like this. And somewhere inside of that for loop, I'm going to see xpos, bracket I, bracket, or ypos, bracket I, bracket, or a combination of both. All right, that's going to be important. So somewhere inside the curly braces for that for loop, I'm going to see xpos and ypos with the I, more than likely. Fair enough? So this will draw all 5 of my targets. Now, if I want to move them, I have to do something similar. Again, I have my for loop, same for loop. I'm doing something with the targets, so I've got the same for loop. And now, rather than y gets y plus speed, I get yi gets yi plus speed's I. All right? And then this down here is just the checking whether it hit the top or the bottom. All right? That just checks whether it hits the top or the bottom. Your game might not do that. You might need something else there. Maybe when it leaves the bottom, it reappears at the top in a random position. So you may need to change this piece. But you're going to have pieces that look like this, okay? You're going to have pieces that look like this to move your targets. And again, remember the other one, I had to move them all, and I had to have all of those if statements to see if they bounced or not. So here, I just have 2 if statements, but I asked those same 2 if statements 5 times. And again, we start at 0, and this number is my number of targets. If you set it up just like this, it will work. That for loop will always be the same. If you want to add more targets, you would just change this number. And you would change in your for loop. All your for loops, you would change that number, and that would change the number of objects. So if you wanted 10, you would make that 10, and you would make this 10, and up here, you would make sure there was 10 numbers in each of these 3 arrays. That's all you would do to get 10 different things. Think about how much harder it would be to do 10 different things if you were tracking all of the individual variables. Now, the next piece, if we want to do the same thing to see if we hit it, I have a function mouse pressed, and again, same for loop, and then I'm asking, basically, this if statement asks, did I hit the first circle? And then it comes back around, and then it asks if I hit the second circle, and then it asks if I hit the third circle, and so on. And it keeps cycling through asking if I hit each circle until it's asked me if for all 5 of my circles, if I've hit them. All right, so start with this idea. When you get stuck, ask me for help, and I will help you think about how you might need to tweak this to make it fit in your particular game. Okay?